On June 30th, 1960, the Democratic Republic of the Congo celebrated its hard-fought independence from Belgium. It was a moment of triumph for the Congolese people, and at the center of it stood Patrice Lumumba, the fiery nationalist who had become the country's first democratically elected prime minister. But less than 7 months later, he would be dead, brutally murdered in a foreign-backed plot that changed the course of Congolese history forever. From the start, Lumumba was a threat to Belgium, to Western powers, and to the elites who had long profited from colonial rule. In his Independence Day speech, Lumumba rejected Belgium's attempt to paint itself as a benevolent colonizer. Instead, he exposed the oppression, the exploitation, and the suffering the Congolese endured under Belgian rule. This speech sent shockwaves through the Western world. To the Belgian monarchy, Lumumba had humiliated them. To the United States, which was in the midst of the Cold War, he seemed dangerously aligned with the Soviet Union. To the CIA and its allies, he was a man who needed to be stopped. Lumumba had inherited a nation on the brink of collapse. Belgium, reluctant to lose control, left the new Congolese government unprepared. Within days, the army mutinied, European settlers fled, and the resource-rich Katanga province, backed by Belgian interests, seceded under Moise Tshombe. Belgium sent troops under the pretext of protecting its citizens, but in reality, it was an effort to maintain control. In Washington, alarm bells rang. The U.S. government feared Lumumba might turn to the Soviets for support. Though Lumumba had repeatedly stated he was not a communist, he refused to be a puppet of the West. That was enough for President Dwight Eisenhower and the CIA to brand him as a threat. Allen Dulles, the CIA director, called Lumumba a Castro of Africa and authorized a covert operation to eliminate him. The agency even considered poisoning him, sending an agent with a vial of poisoned toothpaste. Though that plan was never carried out, other means would prove effective. Desperate to restore order, Lumumba turned to the United Nations, appealing for help. But the UN, under Secretary-General Dag Hammarskjöld, took a neutral stance, refusing to remove Belgian forces or intervene in Katanga. Frustrated, Lumumba turned to the Soviets, accepting economic and military aid, just as the CIA had feared. At the same time, the West found its new ally, Joseph Désiré Mobutu, a young, ambitious army officer. The CIA funneled money into Mobutu's hands, helping him orchestrate a coup. By September 1960, Mobutu seized power, placing Lumumba under house arrest. Lumumba was not a man to surrender easily. He escaped captivity in November 1960, attempting to reach his loyal followers in the East. But as he fled, Mobutu's forces pursued him. On December 1, 1960, Lumumba was caught. He was beaten, humiliated, and transported to a prison in Thysville, where he endured weeks of torture. But even that was not enough for his enemies. On January 17, 1961, Lumumba, along with two of his closest allies, was secretly flown to Katanga, the breakaway province controlled by Belgian-backed forces. It was effectively a death sentence. Hours after arriving, Lumumba was taken into the woods, where he was brutally beaten again before being lined up against a tree. A firing squad, made up of Katangan forces and overseen by Belgian officers, took aim. The man who had fought for his country's freedom was executed in the darkness. His killers didn't stop there. Fearing that his grave might become a shrine, Belgian officers dug up his body, cut it into pieces, and dissolved it in acid. His remains were never recovered, except for a single tooth, taken as a trophy by a Belgian officer. News of Lumumba's assassination sent shockwaves across Africa and the world. In the streets of Congo, riots erupted. In Ghana, President Kwame Nkrumah declared a national day of mourning. The Soviet Union called it a crime against humanity. Meanwhile, Mobutu, now fully backed by the West, tightened his grip on power. He would rule for over 3 decades, turning Congo into a dictatorship that served Western economic interests. The country remained rich in resources, but poor in the hands of its people. Though Patrice Lumumba was physically erased, his legacy endures. He remains a symbol of African independence, of resistance against imperialism. His words continue to inspire those fighting for justice, reminding the world that true freedom is never freely given. It must be fought for. If you found this story important, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to help spread the truth about our history. The more we know, the stronger we stand. Black liberation is a collective struggle, and together we keep the fight alive.